So right off the bat, I'm, scared. I'm 12. I don't know what's going on. And my first thought is, either my dad hates me enough to put me through this, or he has no idea what's happening. And both are equally as scary. People come into your house and they will take you by force, and so they will transport you. So their real names are transporters. They're commonly known as goons.
Yeah, I mean, that's very messed up.
One that sticks out to me is something that they would call pee party. If somebody had to use the restroom, you're always supervised. So you had to wake up a staff member to be like, hey, I gotta pee. They would wake everybody up, and you would all have to stand around to get out of your tent until that person had finished using the restroom. And then everyone could go back to sleep.
You're in tents, did you say? Or you're in dormitories? How did the sleeping arrangements, living arrangements work?
I was taken into a wooden shed. Pants, shirts, socks, shoes, everything is all the same as the other kids. So they strip you down, they make sure you're not hiding anything on you. Yeah, and I just, I tell him that I'm scared to talk and that I'm scared to sleep and that this is traumatizing. I said, this isn't what I need. Please, please, please trust me on this.
Welcome to the Heartbreak to Happiness Show with Sara Davison. If you're struggling with a breakup and you feel shocked, angry, betrayed, devastated, or sad and alone, then this podcast is for you. Best-selling author and award-winning host Sara Davison shares how you too can get on with your life to heal, grow, and move from heartbreak to happiness. Here's your host, Sara Davison.
Welcome back to the show. And today I am really excited to have Leanne Roberts. Now, this is going to be a really tough listen for some of you. So please make sure that you're prepared to listen to this. You've got people around you that might be able to support you. It's going to be a bit hard hitting because it's a topic that's very close to my heart about domestic abuse. Those of you that listen to my podcast will know that I talk about this a lot. But this is a very different angle. Leanne is going to talk to us about 3 different children's camps that she was in the United States, where she witnessed and experienced things, well, that quite frankly, no child ever should. So, Leanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited to have you, and I'm just super proud. I know I'm so much older than you, could be your probably grandmother, but I'm super proud that you've got the strength and the courage to speak out, and I'm very grateful that you've come on my platform because I really want to support you having a voice, because I think having a voice is something that you haven't had. And
yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us maybe if you kind of share how old you are now, and then maybe let's go back and talk a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, so now I'm 19, and I had a little bit of a rocky childhood. I grew up with, I'm the eldest of 3 siblings. I grew up in California, and when I was 12, my parents went through a pretty rocky divorce. My mom is an addict, and my dad was really avoidant at the time. So like any scapegoat or textbook family, the eldest is typically the scapegoat child, and that is very quickly what I became. And with, I was able to see a lot that was happening in the home, but not old enough to articulate it. So I understood what was happening, but didn't know how to express that, the things that I was seeing and hearing. With addiction, it's a tricky thing. So I know that, my mom loves her children, but it's a disease. And so with a disease, it's kind of takes over your whole life. And I was seeing my mom change pretty drastically. I was seeing her, not able to emotionally regulate herself. Just things that no kid, wants to see someone that they love go through. And I wasn't able to fully understand or put a name to oh, she's drinking a lot, or oh, this is happening. Pretty quickly after, the addiction started becoming more noticeable to other people, my dad filed for divorce. and it was a long and messy divorce. So I was 12 when they told us they were separating, and very shortly afterwards, I kind of demanded that I live with my dad full time. I wasn't feeling very safe with my mom. But I was struggling with the changes. I was struggling as a 12-year-old. I was lashing out, I was isolating myself. Very normal, typical, child behavior when, your family goes through a dramatic change like that. But I don't think, my dad knew how to be a full-time parent all of a sudden. Overnight it was like 50-50 to, all right, I have, my kids. And how do I navigate all this stuff so quickly? And so he turned for help to an education consultant, because we were all still reeling through the changes, and I was watching my mom get worse, and it was really affecting me and affecting my day to day.
And that education consultant, how did he find her? Was that someone privately he discovered, or was
Yeah.
it through the school, or how did that person come
It
in?
was my understanding. I was 12 at the time, so I don't have a direct recollection, but my understanding was that he found her through a therapist, and the therapist recommended an education consultant to originally just to find me a different school, because we had moved, and I was flunking out of, I think it was like fifth grade, just because I was refusing to go and skipping classes and whatnot. But when he met with her and kind of told her, like, everything that was happening within the family dynamic, things that I was, experiencing, or how I was reacting to everything, she recommended a wilderness program called Trails North Carolina. A wilderness program is basically, anywhere from like a 3 to 4 month stay, where they don't call it behavior modification anymore, but it derives from behavior modification.
Behavior modification. I mean, that sounds horrendous.
Hmm.
What? So you were having, from my experience of working in this field, and I have a son as well. If someone goes through a divorce, I mean, any child, 12, is going to kick off at certain things. You're a child and you're growing up, especially at 12, 13, you're coming into puberty, lots of things are changing. So would you say, by your understanding at that point, as much as you can remember, that you were exceptional, or this was just your normal average kid finding
Yeah.
difficult challenges at home, and that was putting pressure on you?
Yeah, I don't think it was exceptional. There were a lot of things happening where, from a really early age, I was gaslit pretty badly. Not with the intention to harm me, but to protect me. So I would see my mom, throwing up, or I'd find alcohol bottles somewhere, or, we'd get in these really nasty fights because I'm 10, 11, 12, and she's very far from sober. And my dad would come in the aftermath, and he would tell me that, my mom is okay, and that she's just depressed, or she's just upset, and really try to cover that and try to shield. But through trying to protect me, it made me feel crazy. It made me feel like there was something that I was over exaggerating, and so that was all internalized. And yeah, I don't think that my actions following, or reactions to the situation were disproportionate at all. I think any kid, and lots of kids, would react
Yeah,
how I would.
I would agree. And were you offered therapy or any kind of counseling, someone to talk to, or was it straight to behavior modification camp?
Yeah, so I had been refusing to go see my therapist for a while. It was an interesting dynamic. So my mom has a background in child psychology, before her addiction progressed. And so, she would use a lot of terms with these therapists and psychologists, that made them believe that I had bipolar disorder. And you can't diagnose bipolar disorder till later in life, but at 8 years old, I was wrongly medicated for bipolar disorder. And when you're 8 and you get put on a mood stabilizer of any kind, it really messes with your nervous system. And so I quickly associated therapy and taking medication for mental health in a negative light, because it was kind of being used over my head. If I had a good day, it was, oh, well, the meds are working. If I had a bad day, it was the meds aren't working. We need to up your dosage. So I was refusing to go. I was refusing to participate. And I think, my dad felt like he didn't know what else to do for me. So then at that point, it was straight to this behavior modification camp. It wasn't presented to him, though, as a behavior modification camp. He was tricked and lied to as well. So as much as I am a victim of this whole industry, he is too, which has been a hard kind of like conclusion to come to.
Yeah. So tell me what was his perception of where he was sending you?
Yeah, so it was presented to him as this camp where they would help me sleep right, they would help me eat right, they would get me exercising, like a full wellness kind of retreat, if you will. He knew I'd be doing hard work and he knew I wouldn't be happy, but he definitely assumed and was under the impression that all my basic needs were being met and that I was surrounded by professionals and I was going to be well taken care of. From his perspective, we've had conversations about it now, but it sounded like, he really just thought that this would help my self-esteem and that this would give me a boost and it would get me away from the divorce and my family life, and I could, have space from that, and I would feel good about myself if I was doing hard things. And so it was a decision made out of love, which it's hard to understand, or maybe not so hard to understand. As a child, it's hard to understand, but as, I have empathy for him. He felt lost and didn't know what to do, and there was these people with degrees and doctors telling him that these things work, and so, yeah.
And I think, I mean, I love your perspective of it. It must be, tough to sort of process it through, and you've done that incredibly well. And as a parent, you want to do the best thing for your child, and if nothing else is working, then, and someone who, I think a lot of us trust authority. We also trust somebody in medicine or with like mental health. They've got a qualification. They must know more than us. And I think that's where the danger, not just in the States and over here as well, with so-called experts. But okay. So he was lied to about what it entailed. How did you feel from what you knew before you went about going?
So I was told, I think it was 2 or 3 hours before I was to board a plane. So they recommend, and this is the biggest red flag, if an institution or a place is like recommending that they goon your kid. So what gooning is, essentially you can hire a service. I don't know about in the UK, but in the United States, it's a pretty common thing within these institutions. So 2 people, usually 2 men or a man and a woman, will come into your house. It's some hour of the night, typically, and they will take you by force, and so they will transport you. So their real names are transporters. They're commonly known as goons. So when a child says, "Oh, I got gooned here," they got legally kidnapped to go. And they get delivered at these places because parents are afraid that their child will run if they, tell them that what's happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the parents say, okay, we agree to this because otherwise they wouldn't go. And would you have gone? Or, I mean, you weren't even given the choice.
I was given the choice. I went willingly because I was afraid and I was angry. And so at that point, I felt so unwanted that I didn't want to be home anymore. I was like, fine, if you want me to go, I'll go. But a lot of kids don't get that choice. And it was actually pushed on my dad to hire a transporting service because the programs, they say that your kid's going to fight, your kid's going to run. They might try to do something harmful to themselves if they know. And I think that, it's a horrendous concept. And the children and my peers now, who I know are still in recovery from those things, they can't sleep well at night. They have to have so many locks on the doors. They have nightmares from those things. It's truly, truly traumatic.
Because they're scared that someone's going to come and take them again because they didn't know it was happening, and it happened in the middle of the night and done with force.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just child abuse. It's really horrific. Yeah. So that didn't happen to you, thankfully.
No,
You were given the choice. Okay. So, wow. I'm just still reeling from the fact that people would suggest that, and that parents would agree that, and that would be an okay thing to put your child through, because the trauma from that is like you said, is lifelong.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're in your safe place, you're asleep, you're in
Hmm.
your home. I mean, there's so much that's wrong with this. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Okay. Okay, right. So you went willingly, and you went off. So it was a plane flight away. So you were a long way from your family. And did you say it was 30 or 40 days that people go for? Or
90,
three,
90
90
and
days?
more, yeah. So typically they tell you as the student, as the child there, that it's up to you, but it's not up to you. It's like used as a motivation thing that you get to determine when you're ready to go home. But truthfully, they're going to keep you there for as long as they can because that's how they make money. So most kids stay for 3 or more months, and that's kind of the minimum for
So they get paid privately by your parents to
yeah.
send you there.
Yeah, so they're privately and publicly funded. So sometimes the state will send kids, sometimes parents will pay, insurance will cover it. It's a really nasty kind of money trail through education consultants, these programs with other programs. It's all very centered and focused on how can we make, kids for profit, right?
Wow. So the education consultant would get a commission for sending you there, and then they get paid to have you there by the day or the week. So the longer you're there, the more money they make.
Yeah,
So
not all.
it's not based on results.
No, not all education consultants are paid by programs, but some are. Um, and then programs, from my understanding, I'm 19, I don't have a degree in anything, but from my lived experience and my understanding is that programs will pay other programs. So first places that are like wilderness camps, which are only, 3 months stay, will pay, or longer term places like residential treatment centers, where you stay for a year or more, will then pay those short term programs to send kids to them next,
Right.
because it's very rare that a child will only go to one program because it is so focused on money. And they say, that they tell parents that your kid is going to lose all progress if they go back home.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So, I mean, I know you went through some real horrors that no child should ever have to go through it at your first camp. Do you
Mhm.
feel comfortable to tell us what you experienced and just what it was like to be a kid there?
Yeah, I mean, it was traumatizing from the moment that I was, said goodbye to my dad. I didn't talk to him all morning when we got there. I just was like, we're not going to have a relationship after this because this is horrendous and I don't want to go. I'm 12. I'm across the country. It's in North Carolina and I'm from California. There's a time difference, and I wasn't prepared. But the first thing that they do when you get there is they strip search you. So I was taken into like a wooden shed, um, with a male and a female staff. And they want you to, because they give you clothes. So you have no individuality. You have nothing. You have no jewelry that you can keep. You have, program distributed pants, shirts, socks, shoes, everything is all the same as the other kids. So they strip you down. They make sure you're not hiding anything on you or in you. They make sure,
Oh,
they take inventory of like tattoos you may have, already pre-existing wounds that they're not responsible for, things like that. They'll write down, and then they watch you dress in their clothes that they give you. They say that it's so you don't focus on clothing, so you're not like distracted or comparing yourself. But I really do think it's to, make you feel vulnerable and to strip away any comfort that you have or sense of self or individuality. So right off the bat, I'm, scared. I'm 12. I don't know what's going on. And my first thought is, either my dad hates me enough to put me through this or he has no idea what's happening. And both are equally as scary.
were you able to make friends in the camps?
Yeah, you meet a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. And I'm still friends with the girls that I was there with today. You think you really are trauma bonded with the things that you go through. They create a culture within these programs where it feels very isolating to leave. And when you do leave, it's kind of like culture shock. But the girls that I was in there with, are the only ones in the world who know what we've experienced. There were definitely girls there who were not going to receive the help that they needed. They needed more help than this facility could give them. And so I think it really put into perspective just how lucky I am in life, but also, it made me feel like maybe I belonged there. Maybe I was this crazy that I needed to be with some of these people who truly had been suffering from mental illnesses that, being in the woods for 90 days was not going to help.
Yeah. Wow. So what was your average day like? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, so every day was pretty much the same. They were big on consistency and structure, but every day there were things called time frames. So I believe much like in the military, you were given, let's say, 10 minutes to wake up, roll your stuff up. You always repacked your bag every single day. You were packing your bag. Even if you were going to stay at the same spot, you were repacking everything, drinking water, and brushing your teeth. So you had like 10 minutes to do all of that. And if you couldn't, as a group, complete that within that amount of time frame, you would get what we called a negi-con, which is a negative consequence. And if you did complete it, you would get a positive consequence. And more often than not, the only positive consequence that we could earn was time to speak freely. So time to talk. So it was called +5. So each time frame you could earn +5 minutes to just sit as a group and chat with your friends. And the negative consequences really ranged. It's difficult to find punishments when there is nothing to take away already, right? So it's hard to, staff really got creative, and honestly, it wasn't just staff. They would task, each day, one girl would have a day that they're in charge of time frames. And so they would make you decide the negative consequences. And if the staff deemed that it wasn't motivating enough, then they would take over. And so it was a tricky balance between, I don't want to make my group and myself suffer, but I also, need to make it bad enough so, a staff doesn't intervene and really make it like a bad consequence. And some of the consequences were fairly disturbing. One that sticks out to me is something that they would call pee party. And so it basically was in the middle of the night, doesn't matter the hour, if somebody had to use the restroom, you're always supervised. So you had to wake up a staff member to be like, hey, I gotta pee. They would wake everybody up, and you would all have to stand around to get out of your tent until that person had finished using the restroom. And then everyone could go back to sleep. It's definitely, yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah, I mean, that's very messed up. So, oh gosh, Leanne. So, okay, so were you in tents, did you say, or you were in dormitories? How did the sleeping arrangements, living arrangements work?
Yeah, tents. We were in tents the majority of the time. Tents that were years old and had holes in them. We would use sticks and rocks to stake them down instead of actual tent stakes for people who have been camping, the little metal things. But there was maybe once or twice a month where we would be able to stay in yurts. So basically just wooden little structures with a furnace in it, and we could sleep on the floor. But I mean, and those were preferable to the tents only because you didn't have to set them up. But there were mice in the yurts that lived underneath the floorboards, and there was an incident once where a staff member was bit pretty bad by one and had to go to the hospital for a rabies shot. So they were not by any means, they were warmer, but they weren't necessarily more comfortable.
I mean, this is just horrific. And this is 90 days. It's not you're out for a few days camping. It's 90 days.
Yeah, I was there for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's as well. So we were in the thick of the winter, and it was cold.
So you were in sleeping bags, sleeping on the floor in the tents, for tents that were for 2 people with 4 people crammed in them. Um, I remember when we spoke before, you told me that a lot of the girls smelled of urine.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so we were meant to drink a certain amount of water during those time frames that I mentioned. And it was a lot of water. It was about 3 Nalgene's, I think, but during designated times where you just had to kind of like chug. And so girls would inevitably like have to use the restroom. And even if you weren't chugging and we were just on a hike and you had to pee, like good luck to you because staff members are underqualified. They're college level kids. They're like fresh out of college, so they're kids as well, but they're understaffed and they don't have the means to make restroom breaks. So girls would end up peeing themselves because we weren't allowed to use the restroom. And I mean, like, this is an everyday occurrence. So, trails our group therapist had decided that it would be easier or kind of a punishment, like a shame thing, which we were actually excited about, so we weren't soiling our own clothes anymore, was to distribute adult diapers as a solution to this issue. It was more so said as like a threat, I remember, and like more of an embarrassing thing, but it's so much better than, sleeping in those clothes if you're not allowed to use the restroom. But you really truly do go nose blind. Everyone, no one was taking showers. You had like one other pair of clothes. But girls would layer those pairs of clothes because it was so cold and we were not given adequate gear for the weather, the temperatures. So, I mean, really, you were wearing the same thing about every day all the time.
I'm absolutely speechless.
Yeah.
I just don't. The adults that were involved in running these, let's talk a bit about them. Who the hell are these people? And
Yeah.
were they aware of what was going on in their own camps? Is this something that was just commonly accepted? And I mean, how evil do they have to be? What were their qualifications? How does this?
Yeah, truthfully, I don't know. The only adults that we as children ever interacted with were the staff members who were like the low on the low of the totem pole in terms of responsibility and logistics. But it is, it's a part of a bigger industry that is so money hungry and so money hungry. So by not giving us, adequate food or medication or showers or proper places to sleep or new gear, that saves them a lot of money because you're charging a lot for these kids to come in. And so it's all about, making those like seemingly little cuts in funds to gain the most. And it's pretty horrendous stuff. I don't know truly, about the people who were in the office buildings and on their computers and functioning these things. I think it would be a stretch to say that they didn't know what was going on. I think that they were in charge of those things.
I'm just trying to get my head around. This is a behaviour correction camp. What, it was just brutal. I mean, child abuse on another level. With how many children in each camp?
In mine, there were most at 12, but you're not allowed to really speak about other camps. You don't, if you see some other group crossing, because they're categorized by age. So I believe I was in the youngest age group, being 12. But if you see other camps, you're not allowed to kind of acknowledge that there are other kids present. You have to ignore it, otherwise you'll get in trouble. They have a lot of restrictions, much like a cult functions, like it's very much so like blind trust. So you weren't allowed to know the day, you weren't allowed to know the time, you weren't allowed to know what was happening next. They would call it future tripping or future information. And you couldn't ask for those things. You could earn, I think it was at phase 4 or 5, you could ask for one time check a day. So you could ask a staff member, hey, what time is it? And they could tell you like, oh, it's 4, it's 3, whatever it may be. But you're not allowed to share that with anyone else, and you get to ask one time per day.
How did you communicate with your father? Were you able to speak to him, or friends and family? Did you have any devices? Did you have any
No,
communication?
yeah. So once a week you could write a letter, a handwritten letter on a piece of paper that they give you. You're only allowed, I think it was two pieces of paper, and those letters though were read and filtered through your therapist. And you can only receive letters once a week. So there were no phone calls, there were no talking with friends or other family members. It was just, your primary parents.
So you were completely isolated from the
Mhm.
rest of your life.
Yeah,
You were put in an environment which was brutal, which didn't
yeah,
meet your basic needs.
yeah.
You couldn't even chat to the other kids unless that was a posicon, a
Hmm.
positive consequence of something that you'd done. So you had to earn the right to chat to them. Obviously, this was there to help you, allegedly. That's what you were sold. Clearly, that wasn't the real intention. But let's say, how did you feel while you were there? What were you going through?
Yeah, I just remember being so ashamed, right? I went through a process for a little bit where I was so angry, and then it was kind of beaten into me by the other kids, like, look, like you're never gonna get out of here if you don't start complying with their program. And so pretty quickly, I just was like, all right, like maybe I am, deserving of this treatment. Maybe I am such a bad kid and I've done so many bad things in my life that I deserve to kind of be here and that I need to earn my way out. I need to prove that I am good enough to come home. So actually, in letters I had written to my dad that I possess now, I say verbatim, I say like, I promise like I'll get better, or I'm working so hard to get better to come home. And in my mind, to reread that, that's heartbreaking for me because I'm 12. And there was nothing wrong with me in the first place. I was a product of my home environment. I have, gratefully from all these things, I've been diagnosed with CPTSD, which is not so surprising. But other than that, I don't have any clinical disorders or illnesses and whatnot. And so that, being retested has been so validating for me that not that anyone deserves this kind of treatment, but that the labels that were being thrown onto me were very inaccurate.
What kind of
But yeah,
labels were thrown at you?
yeah, that I was the reason for the dysfunction in my family. So at the time I
Oh,
was at
wow.
12, I was taking responsibility for my mom's addiction, for my dad's avoidance, for the dysfunction. My mom often would say that I'm the reason that my parents got divorced. Just some nasty things that, hindsight, I can be like, wow, that was a projection, that wasn't me. But at 12, you really internalize that and that sticks with you pretty long. So part of their program actually is what's called an LOA, so a letter of accountability. And to progress in the program, you have to write one. And basically, I'm 12. I don't even know how to spell accountability. In my letter, it's misspelled wrong but it's 12 pages of things that I'm apologizing for at 12 years old. And they range from having emotions to playing Minecraft when I could have been spending time with my family, or things that I think, taking accountability is good for, like refusing to go to therapy or school for sure. But they really, and the longer your letter is, the more you're kind of rewarded. So the more things that you can take accountability for and apologize for, the more you're kind of emotionally rewarded with like, good job, you're getting out of here soon, or this is a good step, like you're progressing, kind of um, things that they tell you. So it was hard for sure. I felt so unwanted, and like I was, that my parents' love was not unconditional for me, that I had crossed some line that I was unaware of, and that I deserved to be there because I had caused so much, harm or dysfunction, which is ultimately not true, but that's really what they want you to believe.
And did you ever believe that, truly believe it when you were there, or were you playing the game to get yourself out of there?
No, I truly believed it. I think when you have no access to the outside world, this is your world. You're 12 years old. Like, this is all that you know for 3 months. This is your culture. It's completely different. There are, language that they use that no one else knows about. It feels very isolating, and the only comfort you can find is kind of within community. And so to be a part of that community, you have to kind of surrender. And so I really did believe it. And, it didn't help. My second day there, it was a letter day. So I was able to write a letter. And I write to my dad basically that it's traumatizing. I say verbatim, you don't shower here for a very long time and you wear the same piece of clothing every day. Um, I ask him to pick me up, please. There are, some girls have been here for 4 months. I don't think you understood where you sent me. Pinworms were going around the camp at the time. I'm not sure if you know what pinworms are, but they are not pleasant. Yeah, and I tell him that I'm scared to talk and that I'm scared to sleep and that this is traumatizing. I said, this isn't what I need. Please, please, please trust me on this. And I didn't get a response back, like from him, acknowledging all the things that I had written, because the therapist, from his perspective and what he's communicated to me when we've readdressed these things, is that they prep parents and they tell parents, kid is going to write A, B, C, D, E, F, G to the T. She prepped him for everything I was going to write before she sent it over and said that this was a manipulation tactic and that I was lying. And everything I write here is true. At 12 years old, I was, very guilty of lying and trying to get my way out of things, but everything I say here is true. And the response that I got from him was, I know this is hard, but you're going to be able to get through it and you'll be better for it. And so in my mind, I'm really thinking he knows everything that's going on and he thinks I deserve it and that I need to stay here. And so this is my punishment kind of thing.
And how did that make you feel towards your family?
Yeah, for a while I was really angry, and then I just felt really ashamed because if everyone around me, all these adults are telling me that like this is the truth, that my dad knows where I am, he knows what I'm experiencing, and he willingly sent me here, then I'm like, well, then I must deserve it, right? Then I must need to be here, and there must be something inherently wrong with me and I need to get better in this program. Like I need to do better, I need to be a better person.
So, I mean, after your 90 days, what happens? Is there like did you get to go home or did you go on to one of the other camps that you were talking about?
Yeah, so the intention, I was promised that once I completed this program, I would get to go home. And then very quickly, you get there and the other girls kind of tell you, like, hey, that's not true. Like, you're not going home. Like, nobody goes home. And for a second, I was like, well, screw you. Like, I am going to go home because my dad told me I was going to come home. And they're like, it does not matter. I remember this girl who was 16 at the time and I was 12, and she had told me, like, look, it doesn't matter what your parents told you before this. Like, you're not going home afterwards. And it kind of hit me there where I was like, well, like, I really am alone, I really am going through this by myself. And so directly from Trails, I went to a therapeutic boarding school in Oregon called New Leaf Academy. It is now Embark. They've changed ownership. And I stayed at New Leaf Academy for, I believe it was 15 to 16 months. So I was there for quite a while. Yeah.
Did you see your dad before you went or during this period of time?
Yeah, so my mom, like I had mentioned, has a background in child psychology, and she was able to convince my therapist at Trails that, it was me who was the one who was crazy. I was a scapegoat for things, like I said, but, she used the right terms, the right terminology to kind of connect with her and kind of forced a relationship back. So after not speaking with her, seeing her for quite some time, she came to pick me up to transport me to Oregon. So I didn't see my dad in between that time. But the facility in Oregon would facilitate visits, so you could earn them. So I would go home, after 6 months of being there, I could go home for, like a few days at a time every like 2-3 months. It was interesting because it doesn't sound like the freedom you might think it is. It's actually was nerve-wracking because everything was kind of reported. So when you came back to the facility, they would ask your parents to fill out a report visit. kind of just saying like what happened if you misbehaved at all, like, and they would kind of go over that. And if you did misbehave or beg to come home or you say anything kind of really, it was a much bigger deal when you were there. You could lose those home visits. So it really felt like I had to be kind of this like perfect child while I was home. And it was actually genuinely more relaxing to be at the facility than at home during those visits.
And you didn't feel that you could say to your dad face to face, this is what's really going on, because he would just report that back to them.
Yeah. Yeah, he was so trusting at that point, of these programs because he had seen, or what he thought he had seen was growth from me, right? But I was just so afraid that I was, became a perfectionist, a people pleaser, and that looked drastically different from where I was, prior trails.
So you learned to be completely disingenuous and to
Yeah.
mask your feelings, your true emotions, to not have a voice, so you were completely silenced,
Yeah.
and to perform as they needed you to perform, or they told you had to perform out of fear. So all this is manipulation out of fear because
And
you're going to
shame.
lose
Yeah.
something or be, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Have
Yeah.
you
Well,
ever spoken to any of them since you've come out, or addressed it to them, like found the people?
the education consultants.
Hmm.
I've tried, I've reached out via email, just wanting to speak, just to understand a little bit more. I'm on such a process of like recovery and healing, doing, trauma reprocessing therapy, figuring out myself. I thought it would be helpful, just to put pieces together. But I have not had I heard a response back. I don't think that that's something that these people are interested in doing. And I can't blame them. I would feel ashamed as well. Trails recently just got shut down, actually, within this past week because they had the second child die in their program. And there was a lot of violations that they found, not even regarding his death. So they shut them down for a completely different reason than the boy dying. But
You said second child, so the first
yeah,
child wasn't enough to shut them down.
no. The first child died, I believe, 2 years before I enrolled in Trails. And then this most recent child was just 12 when he passed away. They have not released the autopsy report, but I think they believe he either ingested something or was suffocated because they use restrictive methods. So on your first day there, when I was there, they used something called a burrito. And that's like a really friendly term for not such a friendly thing. You have to sleep in your sleeping bag wrapped up in a camping tarp, and a staff member will sleep on the outside of that tarp and on the other side of you, kind of restricting you so you can't run away in the middle of the night. So if you were to get up and struggle, they would be able to like feel you. You're pretty restrained in there.
Every time you say something, I just can't believe it's going to get worse. And then you say something that's even
Mhm.
worse.
Yeah, it's not
Okay,
pleasant.
so what kept you going, Leanne? Because you're incredibly eloquent. I mean, you talk about it. I mean, obviously you've been through so much trauma. Talking about it, must be hard. How did you get through those days? What kept you going?
I think for a long time I was so angry. A lot of anger kept me going. I was so kind of spiteful, with the world, with everything, that I just, knew that once I got out, and I got home, that it would be okay. And so anger was a big motivation. I wanted to prove people wrong. Truthfully, I don't know. I think that this is a bigger kind of calling for me to start to talk
Yeah.
about these things and to bring awareness for it. I think that I've turned something that's, altered my life, into something I can use for good, but I'm definitely still navigating everything that comes with it. I remember after my second program, I was home for about a year before I got sent away again. And when I found out I was getting sent away again, I remember I was sitting in the living room with my dad and I told him, I will go willingly, but one day people are going to make, this is going to be in the news. People are going to make movies about this. This is going to be this is gonna be looked on with such horror, and you're gonna be really sorry. And then I went to my third facility, and you know what I
What?
said
Can I
then
just
was
ask,
true.
why would they send you off again after all that time you've been back? What
Yeah.
was their reason for a third time?
So, most kids actually get sent back into these facilities because they do not set you up for success to transition back. So a lot of kids will come back home and be so overwhelmed with culture shock, with, for perspective, when I left when I was 12, Musically was still a thing. We didn't even have TikTok yet. And then when I came back, TikTok was, there were just big like social changes and whatnot. And I was starting my freshman year of high school, kind of not knowing anything. And so I was struggling. I was isolating again, but in my opinion, I was doing very typical normal teenage things. I was, pushing on boundaries. I was experimenting with weed. I was staying out late with my friends. And I think it scared my dad because for so long I had kind of been compliant and respectful. And then my dad started dating. And there were things that were really not handled well. I think for lack of understanding, but there were no conversations, when she moved in with us. No one talked about it. I didn't know it was happening. When they got engaged, there wasn't really a conversation that was had. So I was really pushing. I was unhappy with all that. And I was kind of, screaming, waving my hands, being like, hey, this isn't right. You need to have a conversation with your kids. I was pushing on him. I was kind of pushing him to be, to make some changes, and it didn't go over well. So that's my perspective, right? And then I was sent away again, and I understood that I was not going to come home after I was sent away again, that was the 1 year I was going to, have lived at home. And so then from there I went to a traditional boarding school. So not a program, but I did not come back home.
Okay, so how is your relationship with your dad now? You have the most incredibly mature and emotionally intelligent ability to see somebody else's perspective, I have to say. Like,
Thank you.
yeah, a lot of people would hold on to that bitterness and anger and find it very difficult to understand and have the amount of compassion you do for your dad's decision-making process. And yeah, I understand there's two sides to it, but to hear you say that, is that how you genuinely feel? You genuinely feel that compassion?
Yeah, it's tricky, and it's something I still am working on, but as an adult now, I have so much empathy for him. It's his first time going through life too. He had he stayed in a really unhappy marriage and went through that trauma with my mom. But as his child, I have a lot of anger still. And so it's very, it's a push and pull sometimes. There are some days where I'm like, look, like, I don't want to have lunch with you. I don't want to come over. I need space. I love you, but like, I'm upset. And then there are other days where I'm like, oh, like, I'm so sorry that you had to experience this too. And it's a tricky thing to navigate, right?
And how does
But
he feel about it, given the fact that he knows the full truth of everything that he sent you to?
I think, I mean, I can't imagine how many feelings there are about it. I think, is more open to listening to me now, more than, just within this past year. So many things have come out about it. And everything that I was saying is kind of validated by legal stuff to back me up. And there's the program on Netflix, which I think did a great job of kind of, they made a documentary about these facilities, and because it's so horrendous.
What's the documentary called on Netflix?
The program.
The program.
It's really well done. And so I asked him to watch that, and he did.
I mean,
And I
that
think,
must have been devastating for him as a
yeah,
parent to see, oh my goodness, because the so-called experts,
yeah,
and these are global. It's not just a US issue. We have real
yeah,
issues with them here in the UK. I know in Australia, I've interviewed therapists over there who are also campaigning against these sort of issues. There are so much corruption,
hmm
and it's a very difficult thing for
Yeah.
people to get their heads around, and because we get it's money, right? It's
Hmm.
corruption for money, but there's also that human element, and it's so cruel, and it's evil, and it's evil at its purest form to abuse a child in that way.
Yeah.
But also, you're also abusing the parent
Yeah.
who's in a difficult, vulnerable position, who's saying, "Please, can you help my child?" So there's multiple layers of abuse here, and then the damage that's done. I mean, I know you were talking about CPTSD.
Yeah.
I don't know how your dad copes with what he's been through. I don't know how other people who've been in those scenarios feel, but I'd love to speak to them and give them a voice, because, like you say, from your perspective, you can see that there are two sides here, and actually that it's not you or your dad that created this; it's
Hmm.
them that set these
Yeah.
programs up and then sell children into those programs.
Yeah. He
And
was lied to as well. Yeah.
yeah, he was lied to as well. So wow, yeah. So you're out now. I mean, you're obviously doing an incredible job. Talk to me a bit about you mentioned this was your reason for being here. There was a reason behind it. Tell me more about that, because I love that. I love that idea. Yeah.
Um, I think that, if people were aware of what's happening, that these places would be shut down without a blink of an eye. But I think that they get away with what they do because they don't have, as much regulation as needed. And people don't know about these places. Even in the States, like people, my friends find out new things every day. My family, even my extended family, doesn't really have knowledge of these facilities, because they are, I mean, so many kids, my friends too, like they don't want to talk about it. They don't want anyone to know still because they are like riddled with so much shame. And they're carrying that still because that's what these programs kind of feed off of is being having their children be afraid and ashamed, and feeling like you're guilty of something. So you wouldn't want to go tell people what had happened because, you know, so I just think that the more people that know about these things and the truth of what goes on, and that these facilities are abusing kids in the name of profit and therapy, the more that their attention will be turned on them, and there's going to be pressure there to improve, on their care and their treatment and their therapy tactics.
Absolutely. And do you feel that this is your purpose now? Like, is this kind of your therapy of turning your pain into your superpower, and like then shining a light? But is it helping you as well?
It is helping me. I think, truthfully, it wasn't until this year that I was able to start talking about it with people. And it has done so much for, my kind of internal monologue of, or how I view myself. Having people hear truthfully everything that I've been through, and their response is not like, you deserved it, but it's, wow, like, that's not okay, has been so changing for me, just in the way that, I'm not carrying so much shame anymore. It's not my fault. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. And that truly has shifted for me just this year. And so the more, work I can do around it, the more I can share, the more I can talk about it. I know that it's done wonders for the people that I love who have also been through these facilities with me, have started to come out and talk about it as well.
Oh, have they? Great. I mean, it's important, and I often think with the challenges that we have here in the UK, which I talk about a lot on my podcast, that actually from the outside it's quite hard to change a system, but the children that have been
Mhm.
impacted by this, the state sanctioned abuse, or the system you've been through, it's the children speaking up, the
Yeah.
voices that are so powerful. Because the way you talk, especially when you're so eloquent and so together and
Yeah.
able to really describe such harrowing things whilst maintaining your composure. And I mean, it is quite mind blowing, Leanne. You're quite an incredible woman. I think, it's going to inspire a lot of people, and you're going to be able to make a lot of change, have a huge impact, because it's your experience, your lived experience. How do you feel? Is it scary for you now to have a voice when you've been silenced for so long?
Yeah, there are times where I've been about, people from this industry kind of like trying to trick me or to trap me when I'm asked a question. if that makes sense. It just is, there's this kind of like shadow always of like, what if I get sent back? What if I can't because I'm an adult now, but there's always this irrational fear of like they're looking at me. I've had people who have worked as staff members in some of the facilities that I've been at find my social media where, I have done a video with Unsilenced and I talk about it on my TikTok or what be it. And these are normal, regular people, and my heart just drops, and I am afraid for a moment, and for an instant, I want to take everything down and just kind of drop off. And
Do they
but
engage with you? Do they comment? Do they ask you?
yeah,
What do they say?
I had someone comment just like a haha or like an LOL or something like I make fun of it sometimes on my TikTok because that's how I cope with humor. But it's interesting. I know that it's being kind of like talked about and spread around because I know that I'm remembered in some of these facilities. And I know I'm remembered as kind of a people pleaser or a good kid. And so I know the narrative is kind of changing when people come across these videos. But I think that I don't know, there's power in it too, right? That I get to be like kind of like, haha, like I got you, you thought you tricked me, like
And that is the silver lining, right? To
mhm.
see how, I always believe that people may try and break you, and obviously
Yeah,
you've been in that scenario where people have tried, and multiple people. They've abused your trust of authority. They've
yeah,
abused their, the age that they're the adult and you're the child. They've abused that dynamic. They've taken away all your basic needs, your right, your ability to communicate and love and connect with anyone. And yet they never broke you, Leanne,
yeah.
because they can only do that if you give that to them, and you
Mhm.
didn't. And that anger, I guess, and that
Yeah,
drive in you that you were going to get yourself out of there is an incredible gift, because that has got you through and that has got you out. And now that's the strength that you have to
mhm.
say, enough is enough. You
Yeah.
picked on the wrong person. Screw you. Watch this, which has been my
Yeah.
motto for many years as well. I find it so empowering to see that at a young age. And I really applaud you, because it's brave to speak out.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
it's brave to stand up and say, this is what has happened to me. Because, yeah, I mean, there's, that shame where you have nothing to be ashamed of, and there was nothing you did that was your fault. To be able to stand in that and lean in and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to stand up for all the people. Because are there kids still going through this as we're talking now?
Yeah, unfortunately, I believe the number is like 120,000 children currently are in facilities like these places. I know that, there's an issue where a program will be shut down and then reopened under a different name with the same kind of logistics and head of the programs. So nothing really changes but their name. And they get away with a lot because they have money. It's a $1 billion industry. So, and I think a part of the issue is no one has a recommendation to replace these facilities with, right? Because there will always be a need for mental health help. That's just the truth of it, right? Like people need children, parents need help and support sometimes. But it's like, okay, well, how do you help them?
This is absolutely not mental health help. So
No, yeah,
this is this is child abuse. This is
yeah,
destroying people.
yeah,
Stripping people right back to their basics is not a way to empower someone to
I
change.
agree.
So, I mean, and manipulating people out of fear is something
Mhm.
that abusers do, and
Yeah,
that is what you've described from the
yeah.
minute you started talking. I mean, I'm so impressed with you, and honestly, if there's anything I can ever do to help or support
Thank
you,
you.
I mean, what has to happen next? I mean, you're speaking out, but what in your mind are there steps you're wanting to do to create the change? How do you get this? Well, what needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because it feels so overwhelming sometimes because it's such a layered and big kind of issue and industry. I'm in the middle of writing a memoir, kind of more in detail about everything we talked about. But there's a nonprofit called Unsilence that's really doing work to try and, bring awareness to these facilities. Paris Hilton has done a lot for this whole issue. I think I would love to see more like regulation with these places, more involvement from authorities and regular kind of checks that all these laws that are set in place for a reason are being met. But it's a tricky question, and I don't know, truthfully.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's a big thing to change,
Mhm.
and there are other people doing certain things. So I guess raising awareness, which is what you're doing,
Yeah.
is a great step. Partnering with some of those other players, I'm sure Paris Hilton would love to speak to you. I think you're incredibly inspiring.
Thank you.
And I also, writing your book. I mean, I think that's going to be a bestseller because everybody is going to need to read that, because we all need to understand what's going on, even if it's uncomfortable, right? Even though I
Yeah.
know a lot of my listeners will be going, "Oh my gosh, this has been a tough episode, Sarah," and it is, and it's intended to be, because this is the reality of the world we're living in, and the
Yeah.
awareness. If everybody has the awareness, then everyone can stand up against it and say that's not
Yeah.
okay. And the
Yeah.
more awareness you create, the more movement you get.
Yeah, and my story is not unique at all. That's, I think, what has the power to it, is that everything that I've said today is like another kid has experienced it. More than one, at least 12 that I know of, right, personally. But yeah, I think there's value in being uncomfortable and listening to something that is uncomfortable, because that's the motivation for change, right? Uncomfort or
Wow,
discomfort.
well said.
But
Well said. So where can people find you, Leanne?
yeah, my Instagram is Leanne Roberts. And then my TikTok handle again is Leanne Roberts. So through
Brilliant.
there.
So I have one question that I ask all my podcast guests to end on, and because it's called Heartbreak to Happiness, I like to know, what is happiness for you now that you're out?
It's silly, but just freedom, bodily autonomy, self-expression, getting to create and choose things for myself, getting to if I want to walk to a coffee stop or store, I can walk to a coffee store, and no one can do anything about it. And I think that there's little moments like that where I just feel so grateful, and I celebrate quite often that I can just get up and walk where I want to walk, and I can get up and wear what I want to wear and do what I want to do. And I think that, I think everyone should be grateful for that, but I think it holds a little more value and weight for me. So that's my like daily little happiness.
Wow, that's so powerful. Thank you, Leanne. I can't tell you how impressed I am by you, your courage, your strength. And I just know that this will inspire so many people, but also I know it's going to help inspire the hope for the kids that are still there, that 120,000 kids, and the kids that are yet to get there too. So yeah, we're supporting you all the way. So thank you so much for being an absolutely incredible guest. Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Truly.
That's it for today's episode of Heartbreak to Happiness. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to win a free ticket to Sara's virtual Heartbreak to Happiness retreat. This is a transformative combination of live webinars with Sara herself, coupled with her empowering online video program designed to help you cope better with your breakup and start feeling happy again. Thank you, and join us again on the next episode for another dose of Heartbreak to Happiness.